Good day, Creative Spirit, and welcome. We'll start today with hymn number 409 from Voices United, Morning Has Broken. Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first word. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for them springing fresh from the wood. Sweet the rains will fall, sunlit from heaven, like the first dew fall on the first grass. Praise for the sweetness of the wet garden, sprung in completeness where God's feet pass. Ours is the sunlight, ours is the morning, born of the one light, Eden's a play. Praise with elation, praise every morning, God's recreation of the new day. How can you not feel good when you sing that? We absolutely do. Feeling good. All right, and our next one, because it just feels so springy. Number 703 in Voices United, in the bulb there is a flower. In the bulb there is a flower, in the seed an apple tree. In cocoons I've been in promise, butterflies will soon be free. In the cold and snow of winter there's a spring that waits to be unrevealed until its season, something God alone can see. There's a song in every silence, seeking good and melody. There's a dawn in every darkness, bringing hope to you and me. From the past will come the future, what it holds a mystery, unrevealed until its season, something God alone can see. In our end is our beginning, in our time infinity. In our doubt there is believing, in our life eternity. In our death a resurrection, at the last a victory, unrevealed until its season, something God alone can see. Ah, yes. Feeling good. It is spring indeed. Not that it hasn't been spring for a number of weeks now, probably close to 6. But just can't help but feel, we had a little cold spell there. We had some snow in April, not so long ago. And this past weekend, if anybody was out, just happened to be so incredibly, the orchards, I mean, daffodils have been amazing this year, and so have so many of the other spring flowers, but of course the orchards right now are in peak bloom, and it is amazing. So I couldn't help but go back and pull this reading called Entering the Season of Blossoming, and it is written by Christine Walters-Paintner. And she starts out from Song of Songs, or Song of Solomon, chapter 2, verse 11 through 13, which reads, "For see, the winter is past, the rains are over and gone, the flowers appear on the earth, the time of pruning the vines has come, and and the song of the dove is heard in our land. The fig tree puts forth its figs, and the vines in bloom give forth fragrance. Arise, my beloved, my beautiful one, and come. And from the poet Hafiz, spring and all its flowers now joyously break their vow of silence. It is time for celebration and not for lying low. And Christine writes, I believe deeply that the seasons have a great deal of spiritual wisdom to offer us if we make space to listen. They teach us of the cycles and seasons of the earth and of our own lives. We are invited into the movements of blossoming, fullness, letting go, and rest over and over again. Just like the lunar cycles of the moons waxing and waning, so too does the body of the earth call us into this healing rhythm. The spring equinox was back in March, when the sun hovers above the equator and day and night are equal length. This is considered the new year in Persian tradition, as well as the astrological calendar. Spring is a time of balance, renewal, and welcoming new life into the world. While the Northern Hemisphere continues in this season of blossoming, we've been called to tend the places of our lives that still long for winter's stillness, as well as those places ready to burst forth into the world in a profusion of color. It takes time to see and listen. Around us, the world is exploding in a celebration of new life, and we may miss much of it in our seriousness to get the important things of life done. Lynn Unger has a wonderful poem titled Camas Lilies, in which she writes, "And you, what of your rushed and useful life? Imagine setting it all down, papers, plans, appointments, everything, leaving only a note. Gone to the fields to be lovely. Be back when I'm through with blooming." Oh, that's good. I have to read that again. Gone to the fields to be lovely. Be back when I'm through with blooming. Spring is a time to set aside some of the plans and open ourselves to our own blooming. There is a playfulness and spontaneity to the season of spring that invites us to join this joyful abandon. As Hafiz writes, spring is a time for sending forth and celebration. We are called to both listen deeply to the blossoming within ourselves, as well as to forget ourselves, setting aside all of our seriousness about what we are called to do and simply enter the space of being. In this field of possibility, we discover new gifts. On my daily walks in Seattle, I have seen clusters of crocuses thrusting themselves out from the ground into the brilliant sunlight. The branches of cherry trees begin to hum, preparing to burst forth. Small shoots are ready to press outward, anticipating their explosion into a pink spectacle of petals. And in my presence to this dynamic energy, I discover places within me humming and bursting forth. I notice my own deep longings, wanting to emerge in vibrant ways. The fertility of spring speaks of an abundantly creative God who is at the source of this potent life force beating at the heart of the world. Created in God's image, we are called to participate in this generous creativity ourselves. Our own blossoming leads us to share our gifts in service to others. In the Hebrew scriptures, the promise of God's abundance is often conceived of a blossoming in the desert. In that harsh landscape, a flower bursting forth from the dry land is a symbol of divine generosity, fruitfulness, and hope. Hope is a stance of radical openness to the God of newness and possibility. When we hope, We acknowledge that God has an imagination far more expansive than we do. And so here is something for you to practice this week. Before the blossoms head on their way, we've got a few more days, I think, of the amazing orchards in bloom at the moment. And so take some time this week to meditate with gratitude on a flower, any flower, appreciating all of its qualities of beauty, how it simply is what it's created to be. Allow yourself to fill with joyful gratitude for the gifts of the earth. Open yourself to experience the fullness of this flower and of all the ways God delights in the beauty of blossoms. Then shift your focus from the flower to yourself. Take this sense of wonder and awe at the beauty of the flower and imagine how God gazes with delight on the beauty of who you are. What aspects of your being can you imagine God relishing? What are the longings inside of you God is asking you to embrace? Rest in this awareness of the joy and delight of God in your own beautiful blossoming for several minutes. Notice what new longing it stirs in you. Let us take a moment in prayer. Creating Spirit, we join with the chorus of all creation to celebrate your wondrous deeds. Fill us with your joy and train our ears for harmony so that we may contribute to the world you are already creating. All this we pray in the name of Jesus, who revealed what is possible through love. Amen. Supplies today for our watercolor blossoms are simply that. So some watercolor paints, whether they're in a palette like this, or whether they are, pans, whether they're tubed, or whether they are liquid, or pencils. Watercolor pencils would be great too with this. Watercolor paper, now I've just taken a 9x12 sheet of 140-pound watercolor paper, and I've cut it in half. And then I cut I've cut some 6x6 squares as well, and then which just left me some little tester pieces, which isn't a bad idea, just so that you can get used to your brush. This is a fairly simple exercise today, so it'll give you time to be able to breathe. And if you've gone out and or prior to, I suppose if you go out now to do your practice, like we mentioned earlier, and I believe that I hope I emailed that practice out to you again, or you can spend your time in prayer over your blossoms at the moment, and then go out and meditate. That would be fine. All right, so that's the watercolor paper, paper towel or rag, water, of course, one dirty, one less dirty. And you may need a paint palette like this if you're using the tube paint. If you're using pans, you may have a palette within it. You may choose to just add blossom type colors of wash on your paper and then just sketch in with Sharpie. Or sketch in with Sharpie and then color it in, that's fine. But the process that we're going to do today doesn't require you, and I'm not joking, doesn't require to have pencil, doesn't require an eraser, and doesn't require Sharpie. But it's there if you've got it. And then, of course, the other thing that you're going to need is some watercolor brushes. And I'm just I was swapping between sort of a number 8 round and a number, I don't know what this might be. This might be a 10 or a 12 round, but it's a long handle. It's really technically probably for oils. It's the longer handle, which I'm not a fan of, but I did like the size of the brush. And then a smaller round, so perhaps like a 2 or maybe a 4 on the round scale, and that would be it. All right. or whatever brushes that you happen to have. Round would be ideal though. That's the big thing. Okay, so let's get started on this, shall we? Today we're just going to be painting blossoms, and they aren't specifically certainly cherry blossoms or ornamental cherry blossoms or Japanese sakuras, if you will. We're just painting blossoms, and you'll notice that the first things likely in the fields, if the orchards around here that were pink, were likely the apricots that were went into blossom first. And then right now there'll be a lot of whites in blossom as well. So, and you'll notice on this that I've included some leaves, and if you were to look at the apricots, you probably wouldn't notice leaves on the apricots blossoms right now. But like things like, you know, apples, when they bloom, there would be leaves and blossoms. So this is not necessarily any one particular type of tree. It is just a branch with some blossoms, and it speaks to spring. And it's fun to do, and it's easy to do. Yay on both those accounts. But this is also our time to, while we're creating these blossoms, to sort of, you know, reflect on the fact that, as it's mentioned in the reading earlier, that we are created in God's image, and that we are called to participate in this generous creativity ourselves, and that our own blossoming leads us to share our gifts in service to others. So that's, as you think about those blossoms, and we can pray for those that, and again, it's, you know, Christian Family Sunday, Mothering Sunday, so if there's anybody that you want to pray for, or that you know who's potentially struggling, this is a wonderful time to be able to do that in your time of creativity. So I've got my paints set up on my dominant side, which is my right side. I'm using my round brush, and we are going to just, and this is on dry paper, okay? So I'm not using the water or the paper wet. And I'm going to do a branch sort of corner to corner. And as the end of the branch would be up here, and I don't have to do the end, right? Much like this, I don't have to do, I'm doing the end, and that you'll have the smaller blooms at the ends of the branch. It's just as it goes. But you could do just a branch that continues, you know, you're sort of getting it midstream. It's starting off the paper, so you're in the middle of it and it's just filled with blossoms. You could do that too. But if you've got a bunch of, if you've got more than one sheet, right, you've got a number of square cards. These are 6-inch square cards. Then, and as I mentioned earlier when you were cutting them, you know, if you've got some of these little smaller pieces left too, this is a great time to sort of test, get used to your brush, test the shape that you like, and then just go ahead and start in on your piece. Again, because really there is no wrong, and I say that I'm not trying to mock our that phrase that we use a lot, but in this particular case, really you're just sort of creating a petal shape, and that could be anything, right? It's just, we're working with 5 petals, and they don't even have to be even remotely look like petals at the beginning. So I'm just adding some water to my brush, and I'm going to take a very light pink, and I'm going to fill my brush with it, and I'm just going to start with a bud. And so we're just doing, and I'll do like one bud here on the end. So I'm going to rotate my paper just because it's easier to with the camera. There's a little bud. And then we'll do another. And this is sort of a, and it could have been a lighter pink even. This has got some what's the word? Not orange. Kind of an apricot-y color in it. And it's probably needs a little more pink to it, but nevertheless, I'm going with it. It's what we've got. And then I'll do another sort of blossomy, and maybe one that's kind of almost coming out, so it's got like, looks more like that. And then you know, go ahead and add now a darker pink at the base of it. It's probably a little Not necessarily the pink that I was going for. How about we go with this pink instead? Yeah, that's probably a little bit better. And you know, if you don't like something, right, it's easy enough to go ahead and pick up that, if you don't like it, to go ahead and pick it up. All right, so I'm just taking my brush, my wet brush, and I'm gonna, it's kind of like a redo. There we go. A little happier with that. A little bit of a redo. Woohoo! And then, let's see, take that lighter pink again. And then I'm going to do maybe a partially opened blossom. So maybe like there's, maybe something like that. And then we'll do one that's fully open. And let's see. So I'll just sort of make the leafy. And you'll notice that you would say, Carolyn does not look much like a 5-petaled anything, and that's okay, right? That is okay. Still gonna add some pink to the bottom of that. Pink sort of in here a bit. And let's do another open one here. Whoa, that's more paint than I really wanted in it. There we go, that's better. Right. There we go, one like that. And maybe another one down here. I'm just doing 5 petals. You may say to yourself, well, Carolyn, they're really not that pointed. Like I say, right, it's all okay. And once you get used to how you want the color of your, the color of your petals the color of the shape, I should say, the shape. I was really going after the word shape. Now you'll see that I've let those dry a little more than I had anticipated, so it didn't bleed quite like so I'm just adding a little more water. Play with it, it's okay. Right, and if there's something else that you're still not happy with, that you're finding is too dark, then you can always, while it's still wet, just dab it with your paper towel too. And then you want to take your, whoops, your next dark red. Right, let it do its thing here. And then you're going to want your smaller, a really small round brush. And a blacky brown color. Just and if it's a little off, like as far as then you can let the brown just sort of connect there with the pink that's already or still wet. Allow some, if it's not perfectly straight, that's fine. That's quite all right. Allow that kind of organic, thing to happen in your brush stroke. That's fine. And I definitely need something happening here. So I'll just make sure we've got and let's do another. And then just some darkers. Right. Let it just go where it wants to there. Let it bleed, and then add a little bit darker in there. Oh, that little guy's really bleeding. We have to pick some of that up. There we go. Again, right, you just clean your brush out and then roll it. Push that paint back a bit, roll it out. And maybe another branch actually up here. And then the darkest at the bottom there. And maybe one on its side. And really, ooh, yeah, that one's, again, we're out of control. That's okay. You might want something a little more red to play with your colors and see what's working for you, right? I'm not fully happy with what's happening here, but you can, as you can see, you can sort of work with it, right? Again, let that black and brown mixture go ahead and let it run in. That's fine. And I'm not, you'll notice I'm not taping anything here, right? I'm just letting it happen. Just letting it happen. And then you may want some leaves. And we'll just add, let's see. Maybe a few little leaves just to help the color pop a bit. And this is just using the side of your brush, right? The shape of your brush, allowing the shape of your brush to take on those leaves. We're not trying to be anatomically correct in the plant world here. We're just creating. You're just going with what feels like a good place to add those leaves, right? And perhaps you know, and something like this would certainly lend itself well to, I mean, if you've got a space and you wanted to use this as a card and you could put that person's name in it there, or thank you, or you know, whatever, you want to fill in another flower. Once these are dry, then you can sort of go through with your darkest red, and mine's a little rubier than I would ideally like, but that's okay. And then you can just drop in dots, and you'll see that's still a little wet because it's, but you can just drop in your little centers like that, your flower centers, and like that. Right, there we go. And for something that you might initially think while you're doing it does not look like, resemble, or otherwise any sort of flower or blossom, well, look at that when it's done. So that's how we're going to go ahead and do our blossoms, right? And like I say, there's all kinds of them here. So, and what a wonderful display of spring and that all that is lovely and beautiful. So enjoy those. They are very relaxing, and when you do them on a small card like this, you'll find that it doesn't take long at all to do them, and that you can do more, and that means then that you can gift more or display more, whichever you would like to do with them. Just have an amazing time with that. That's a lot of fun. This coming Sunday is not only traditionally Mother's Day. Some refer to it as Mothering Sunday because there are so many in a role of mother or mothering or care people that are so many people in positions of care these days, and particularly over this last year, those that perhaps never saw themselves in a care role, or those that were in care roles that never saw to the extent at which they would be in the role that they play. So many important, incredible, strong individuals to remember and think of and hold gratitude and thankfulness for all of those people in positions of mothering and or care. And it's also Christian Family Sunday this week. So keep in mind, keep in your prayers your family, families that may need an extra blessing, that are going through some really difficult times at the moment, or for families, your own family, or families that have taken you in as one of their own. Give God thanks for that family as well. And also, it is also, if you can believe it as well, Rural Life Sunday. And so there is to be thankful for, it's almost, why don't we just call this Thanksgiving Sunday, right? There's so much to be grateful for. But Rural Life Sunday, for those that are celebrating Rural Life Sunday this Sunday, that is a time to give thanks for the seeding and the blessings on the seeds that are being planted for this coming year, and for all that it will provide, and for a good growing season. And prayers to those for definitely for a good growing season. And hopefully, as you have been able to spend some time in those blossoms this week, or that one particular flower, you again will see that the season of growth and blossoming is upon us. And so a reminder from before, that to hopefully take time to meditate this week. Really try to get a moment to spend on a flower, right? Gratitude on one flower, appreciating all of its qualities of beauty and how it simply is what it is created to be. So let's get ourselves recentered before you create your own blossoms. And in those blossoms, giving thanks, praying over those that are, like, again, your families, those in care roles, those in mothering roles. And I want you to, so feet flat on the floor and backs up as straight as you can, so that on your first deep breath in, you can say to yourself, God gazes with delight, and on the way out, on the beauty of who I am. And again, breathing in, God gazes with delight, and on the way out, on the beauty of who I am. And one more time, God gazes with delight, and on the way out, on the beauty of who I am. And together we say, Creator God, quiet my mind before it passes judgment on this prayer, my gift of time to you. Amen. Having an amazing week. I look forward to finding out whether you were able to spend some time amongst the blossoms, amongst the flowers, just allowing yourself to focus on all of the amazing things that flower is, and by just being, it has done what it was created to do. And that it's a wonderful celebration this week. It could be a very difficult week for some. Hold those in your prayers this week for those that you know that are struggling with Mother's Day. Again, it's not always an easy time for some individuals, but there are so many in those care roles, those mothering roles. Keep them in your hearts. Thanks to God for each and every one of you. And I will see you next week. Have an amazing week. Bye.